I have received your messages and your gifts. I do not accept your apologies because I do not believe they are sincere. You had 10 years to support me. You chose mockery instead. I am not interested in a relationship now that I am successful. Please do not contact me again. Any further attempts will be referred to my lawyer. Maya. She sent it, closed her laptop, and went for a walk. The city was golden in the autumn light, the leaves turning, the air crisp. She walked for an hour, past the coffee shop where she used to work, past the hotel where she had cleaned vomit from the lobby, past the studio apartment above the garage where she had written the first draft of her novel on a secondhand desk. She did not feel sad. She did not feel angry. She felt, for the first time in her life, entirely free. The book premiere was held 6 months later in a theater in downtown Los Angeles. The film adaptation had already generated Oscar buzz. The director was an award-winning auteur, the lead actress a rising star. Maya walked the red carpet in a gown that Inez had chosen for her, deep burgundy, with a train that swept behind her like a river of wine. She posed for photographs, gave interviews, and smiled until her cheeks ached. Clara was there, beaming. Samuel, her editor, flew in from Minneapolis. Rachel, her cousin, came as her plus one, wearing a dress she had borrowed from Maya's closet. They sat in the front row and watched as Lan's story unfolded on the screen. The village burning, the silk dress, the rebellion, the final, breathtaking scene where Lon stood on a hill and watched the sun rise over a city she had rebuilt. Maya cried, not because she was sad, but because she was proud of Lon, of herself, of the 10 years she had spent alone, writing in the dark, while her family told her she was nothing. After the screening, there was a party. Champagne, hors d'oeuvres, a jazz band. Maya was surrounded by actors, producers, journalists. Everyone wanted to talk to her. Everyone wanted to know about the sequel. Everyone wanted to know about the woman behind the book. No one asked about her family. She had made sure of that. At midnight, she slipped away from the party and stood on the balcony of the theater, looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Probably her mother, using a new phone after being blocked. She deleted it without reading. Then she called a car and went back to her hotel room, where she opened her laptop and wrote until dawn. The sequel took 14 months. Maya wrote it in her sunlit home office, the same room where she had hung the framed copy of her bestseller on the wall. She wrote in the mornings, when the light was soft, and in the evenings, when the city below her window sparkled like a necklace of diamonds. She wrote without fear, without doubt, without the voice of her father in her ear telling her she was wasting her time. The advance for the sequel was 8 figures. Clara called her, breathless, to deliver the news. Maya thanked her calmly, then went back to work. When the sequel was finished, she sent it to Samuel with a simple note. Here's the rest of her story. I hope I did her justice. He replied within hours. You did more than justice. You made her immortal. The day the sequel was published, Maya sat in her home office and watched the sunrise. The city was waking up below her, cars beginning to move, lights flickering on in apartments, the distant sound of a train. She held a cup of tea in her hands, chamomile with honey, and thought about the past 11 years. She thought about the first rejection letter, crumpled on the floor of her studio apartment. She thought about the night she had finished the first draft, so exhausted that she had fallen asleep with her face on the keyboard. She thought about the Thanksgiving dinner where her father had called her a failure in front of 30 guests. She thought about the moment she had placed the book on the dining table, her hands steady, her voice clear. She thought about Lon, standing on that hill, watching the sun rise. Maya smiled. She set down her tea, opened her laptop, and began typing chapter 1 of her third book. It was not a sequel. It was something new, a story about a woman who had been invisible for 20 years, who had cleaned the houses of the rich and powerful, and who had finally, quietly, brought them to their knees. The cursor blinked. Maya wrote the first sentence. She had learned, over the years, that the most dangerous people in the world were not the ones with power, but the ones who had been taught they had none. She wrote the second sentence, then the third, then the fourth. Outside, the sun climbed higher, flooding the room with gold. The framed bestseller on the wall caught the light, its spine gleaming. Maya, Chen, the family disappointment, the barista, the night receptionist, the woman who had been told she was nothing, wrote on, and the world finally was reading. That's not possible, he whispered. What? Patricia demanded. Richard, what is it? He did not answer. He reached for the book with a shaking hand and turned it over. The back flap. The author photo. Maya had chosen the photograph carefully. It was recent, taken in her new apartment, in a study where the morning light fell across her face. She was not hiding. She was not wearing a disguise. She was simply herself, dark hair, steady eyes, a small smile that held no apology. The caption read, L.N. Tran is the pen name of Maya Chen, a writer living in the Midwest. This is her first novel. Richard made a sound, a choked, strangled noise that might have been a laugh or a sob. He dropped the book. It landed. Maya. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. This is you? You wrote this? I wrote it, Maya said. Every word, every revision, every rejection. For 10 years, the room erupted. Not in applause, in noise. 100 whispers, a dozen questions, the scrape of chairs as guests leaned forward to see. Someone pulled out a phone and began searching for the book. Someone else gasped audibly. The judge, who had been holding his wine glass, finally set it down, his face a mask of fascination. And Ethan, the golden child, the pride of the family name, sat frozen in his chair. His face had gone the color of fresh snow. His smirk was gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. He looked, for the first time in his life, like a man who had just realized he was not the main character. Maya turned to face the room. She raised her voice, not to a shout, but to a pitch that carried to every corner of the dining room. I haven't needed your support in years, Dad, she said, looking directly at Richard. While you were calling me a failure, my hobby was busy hitting the bestseller list and selling film rights to Hollywood. I didn't tell you because I didn't want your toxic negativity anywhere near my success. The words landed like stones. Richard flinched as if she had struck him. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. You told me I was wasting my life, Maya continued, her voice steady. You told me I needed a real career. You told me, in front of this entire room, that you couldn't support a failure forever. Well, I'm not a failure. I never was. I was just working on something you couldn't see because you never bothered to look. She picked up the press release and held it high. This is from a major film studio. They're adapting my book into a movie. The option alone was 7 figures. A real one. The room was silent now. Even the caterers had stopped moving. A single ice cube melted in a water glass, the sound obscenely loud. Ethan stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, a jarring screech. He was taller than Maya, broader, and he had spent his life using that physicality to intimidate her. But now his shoulders were slumped, his hands hung limply at his sides, and his eyes were wet. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. His voice cracked. We're your family. Maya looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. She saw the boy who had followed her around the house, asking questions. The teenager who had, I apologized for interrupting your dinner, but I wanted you to know the truth. The failure you've been pitying for a decade is a New York Times best-selling author. And the golden child you're here to celebrate, she gestured to Ethan, is just a man who got promoted at his father's firm. That's fine, that's good, but it's not greatness. It's just what was expected. She picked up the book, the printout, and the press release. She tucked them back in her purse, one by one, with the same deliberate calm she had shown when she placed them on the table. I'm not staying for dinner, she said. I have a sequel to write, and I don't need anyone's permission to do it. She walked toward the front door. Behind her, the silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then the whispering began, a rising tide of speculation, shock, and from a few of the younger guests, something that sounded like admiration. Patricia called her name. Richard called her name. Ethan said something she didn't catch. Maya did not turn around. She stepped out into the cool night air, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like salt on dark velvet. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the clean, cold air. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. You're my hero. Maya smiled. She typed back, I'm no one's hero. I'm just a woman who finally stopped apologizing. She got in her car, started the engine, and drove home. The next morning, her mother left a voicemail. Maya listened to it while drinking coffee in her sunlit kitchen. Maya, your father and I, we didn't know. Lon was standing on a hill, watching the sun rise over a city she had rebuilt with her own 2 hands. Maya wrote, she had waited a long time for this moment, and now that it had come, she realized she had been waiting not for victory, but for peace. She smiled. Then she wrote the next sentence. The weeks that followed the dinner party were a study in human transformation, or, more accurately, a study in how quickly people could rewrite history when money and fame entered the equation. Maya's phone, which had been a source of quiet humiliation for a decade, became a relentless assault of notifications. Her mother texted 3 times a day. Photographs of Maya's book displayed prominently on the coffee table, links to glowing reviews, and, most astonishingly, invitations to family dinners that Maya had never been welcome at before. Her father left voicemails that range from awkwardly proud, "I always knew you had it in you," to outright revisionist, "We supported you all along, of course." The tough love was just motivation. Ethan went further. 2 days after the party, he sent a long, rambling email that Maya read once and then archived. In it, he apologized for any misunderstandings and asked if the film adaptation of her book might need legal consulting. He noted, extensive experience with contracts and intellectual property. He would be happy to offer his services at family discount. Maya did not reply. The gifts began arriving shortly thereafter. A bouquet of orchids from her mother, with a card reading, "To our brilliant daughter. We are so proud. Dinner at my club." Maya gave the orchids to her neighbor. She donated the first edition to a library. She poured the Dom Perignon down the sink while thinking about all the Thanksgiving she had spent at the end of the table, eating cold turkey while they toasted Ethan's latest promotion. Then she blocked all their numbers. The decision was not made in anger. That was what surprised Maya most. She had expected to feel rage, or at least a cold satisfaction, when she finally cut them off. Instead, she felt nothing but a quiet, absolute certainty. These were people who had spent 10 years telling her she was worthless. They had offered her cleaning jobs and gift cards to styling services and subscriptions to trade journals for administrative assistance. They had laughed at her in front of their friends. They had used her as a cautionary tale. Don't end up like Maya. And now that she was successful, they wanted in. They wanted to bask in her reflected glory, to tell their friends that they had always believed in her, to claim credit for the daughter they had tried to bury. Maya was done. She called Clara and asked for advice. Clara, who had heard the entire story over many late-night phone calls, was unequivocal. "You don't owe them anything. Not a conversation, not a dinner, not a penny. They burned that bridge a long time ago. You're just refusing to rebuild it." "What about the book premiere?" Maya asked. The film studio was planning a lavish launch event for the movie adaptation. "What impression would that be?" Maya asked innocently. Patricia's grip tightened. "That we have stragglers. Just stay in the corner. Please, for once in your life, don't make this about you." Maya allowed herself to be guided to the back corner, where a small cluster of less important guests had been relegated. Distant cousins, elderly aunts, and the one friend of the family who had recently been divorced and was therefore socially radioactive. Her cousin Rachel, a woman in her late 30s who ran a small bakery and was considered the second failure of the family, gave Maya a sympathetic look. "You look amazing," Rachel whispered. "What's going on?" "You'll see," Maya said. She sat down, placed her purse on her lap, and smiled. The next hour passed in a blur of small talk and champagne. Maya accepted a glass from a passing waiter. She rarely drank, but tonight felt like an exception and sipped it slowly, watching the room. She watched her father, Richard, circulate among the guests, his laughter booming across the room. She watched Ethan, the guest of honor, accept handshake after handshake, his smile never wavering. She watched Brooke, now visibly pregnant, hold court near the appetizer table, her diamond engagement ring flashing like a warning. And she watched the empty space at the center of the dining table, where the centerpiece would go. She had brought her own centerpiece. It was in her purse. At 8 p.m., Patricia clinked a spoon against a champagne glass, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," Patricia said, her voice warm and practiced. "Tonight, we celebrate our son, Ethan, the pride of the Chen family. As you know, Ethan has just been promoted to managing director at his firm, making him the youngest person ever to hold that title. We are so proud of him." A smattering of applause. Ethan bowed his head modestly. Richard stepped forward, his glass raised. He was a tall man, still commanding, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said. "To my son, Ethan. From the time he was a boy, I knew he was destined for greatness. He worked hard. He made sacrifices. He never settled for mediocrity." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, and landing briefly on Maya. "He is the pride of the family name. The only one of my children who truly achieved something remarkable." The room murmured in appreciation. Maya felt Rachel's hand squeeze her knee under the table. She did not flinch. She kept her smile in place. Richard continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "And to my daughter, Maya," he looked at her again, and this time he did not look away. "We hope that this year you finally settle down. Get a real career. Stop wasting your life on hobbies. We can't support a failure forever." The words landed like stones in still water. A few guests chuckled uncomfortably. Others glanced at their shoes. Ethan, standing beside his father, raised his glass with a smirk, toasting the air. "To Maya," he said. "May she find her way." Eventually, the room laughed, a nervous, scattered sound. Maya did not laugh. She did not cry. She simply sat there, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene. Patricia, sensing that the moment had gone slightly awry, clapped her hands. "Well, let's Let's move to the dining room, shall we? Dinner is served. The guests shuffled toward the dining table, which had been set with bone china and silver cutlery. Maya remained in her corner, watching. Are you okay? Rachel whispered. I've never been better, Maya said. She picked up her purse, stood up, and walked toward the dining room. Not to the corner, to the center of the table. The dining table seated 30. Place cards indicated where everyone should sit. Maya found hers at the far end, next to a great-aunt who was hard of hearing and a cousin she had never met. Her father sat at the head, her mother beside him, Ethan and Brooke on either side. The important guests were clustered near them, laughing at inside jokes, exchanging business cards. Maya did not sit down. Instead, she walked to the center of the table, where the caterers had left a small, empty space for the floral arrangement that had not yet arrived. She reached into her purse and pulled out the leather-bound book. It was beautiful. Deep blue cover, gold embossing, a ribbon bookmark. The title was stamped in elegant letters, The Silk Weaver's Daughter. And below it, the author's name, Tran. She placed the book face up in the exact center of the table, where everyone could see it. The guests nearest her fell silent, one by one, as they read the title and the name. The silence spread like a wave, reaching the head of the table, where Richard was mid-sentence about Ethan's extraordinary vision. What is that? Patricia asked sharply. Maya, what are you doing? Maya turned to face the room. Her voice was calm, unhurried, and it carried to every corner of the dining room. You asked me to stop wasting my life on hobbies, she said. So I thought I'd show you what my hobby has become. She picked up the book and held it so the title faced the guests. This is my debut novel. It debuted at number 3 on the New York Times Bestseller list this week. It has been translated into 12 languages. A film studio just optioned the movie rights for 7 figures. The room was so silent that Maya could hear the ice melting in someone's water glass. I wrote this book over the past 10 years, she continued. I wrote it between shifts at the coffee shop. I wrote it after my night shifts at the hotel. I wrote it while you were all telling me I was a failure. And I did not tell you because you never asked. You were too busy telling me I was worthless. Her father's face had gone pale. Her mother's mouth was open. Ethan's smirk had vanished, replaced by something that looked like fear. So tonight, Maya said, I'm not here to celebrate Ethan's promotion. I'm here to celebrate my own. And I'm here to tell you that I don't need your support. I never did. She set the book back on the table, turned on her heel, and walked toward the front door. Her heels clicked on the marble floor, each step a small, deliberate punctuation mark. Behind her, the silence broke into a roar of whispers. Patricia was calling her name. Richard was sputtering. Ethan was saying something about impossible. Maya did not look back. She stepped out into the cool night air, pulled her phone from her purse, and saw a text from Clara. Just got the call. Number 2 on the list next week. You're not going to believe it. Maya smiled. She typed back, I believe it. Then she walked to her car, got in, and drove home to her beautiful apartment, where Lon was waiting for her in the pages of a sequel that would not be finished for another year. She had all the time in the world, and she had finally, utterly won. The dining room had become a theater of frozen gestures. A judge held his wine glass midway to his lips. A doctor's fork hovered above a piece of salmon. The string quartet had stopped playing, their bows suspended in air, as if they too understood that something irreversible was happening. Maya stood at the head of the table, not the far end, where a place card had been relegated. The head, her father's seat. She had walked the length of the mahogany table, past the bone china and the crystal goblets, past the stunned faces of guests who had known her since she was a child, and she had stopped directly beside Richard Chen's champagne glass. The room watched as she reached in her purse. First came the book, a hardcover, pristine, its dust jacket glossy and unblemished. Deep blue, with gold embossing that caught the chandelier's light. The title, The Silk Weaver's Daughter, arched across the cover in elegant lettering. Below it, the author's name, Tran. Maya placed it on the table with a soft, deliberate thud, directly next to her father's champagne flute. Then came the printout, a single sheet of paper, folded once, which she unfolded and smoothed flat. It was the New York Times bestseller list, captured from the website that morning. Paperback fiction, number 3, The Silk Weaver's Daughter by Tran. She set it beside the book. Then came the press release. 3 pages, stapled, bearing the letterhead of a major Hollywood studio. Maya had printed it at home, on the same printer she had borrowed from her mother 10 years ago to print her first query letter. The irony was not lost on her. She placed it on top of the printout. What is all this? Patricia's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. She had risen from her seat, her silver gown rustling, her hand gripping the back of her chair. Maya, you're making a scene. Sit down. Now, Maya did not sit. She turned to face her mother, and her expression was calm, almost serene. I'm not making a scene, Mother. I'm making an introduction. She reached for the book and opened it to the copyright page. Her finger traced the small block of text at the bottom, then tapped it twice. The copyright page lists the author's legal name, in case anyone wants to verify. Richard's eyes, which had been fixed on Maya with a mixture of irritation and confusion, drifted to the page. He leaned forward, squinting. His lips moved as he read. Then his face changed. It was subtle at first, a slight tightening around his jaw, a faint narrowing of his eyes. But then the color drained from his cheeks, leaving them the grayish hue of old parchment. His hand, which had been resting on the table, began to tremble. But Maya had the cash. The advance from the film option alone was $1.2 million, an amount that felt surreal when it landed in a bank account that had never held more than $4,000. On top of that, her book royalties kept growing month after month. Clara had encouraged her to invest wisely, diversify her income, and think long-term. Maya had taken that advice to heart. Still, she had made one promise to herself. She was going to buy a home. A real home, not a cramped studio above a garage, not a rented room with a window overlooking a dumpster. She wanted a place of her own, a quiet space where she could write freely, where inspiration could breathe, and where the walls didn't feel like they were closing in around her. She bought the apartment outright. Cash. The real estate agent's expression when Maya transferred the funds was something she would treasure forever. The moving truck arrived on a Saturday. Maya packed her life into 12 boxes. There was not much to pack. The second-hand desk, the ceramic angel from her grandmother, the photograph of her father, still taped to the wall, though she had stopped looking at it, and the framed rejections. She had kept all 38. She hung them in her new study on the wall opposite the window so that she would never forget where she came from. The manuscript of her second novel, a sequel, Following Land's Daughter, was already 200 pages in. She set up her desk facing the sunset and wrote until the light faded. The dinner party invitation arrived 3 days after she moved in. It was not addressed to her personally. It was a group text from her mother sent to the entire family. Ethan has been promoted to managing director. We are hosting a celebratory dinner this Saturday at 7 p.m. Black tie. Do not be late. Ethan's new boss and several board members will be attending. This is an important networking opportunity for the family. Attached was a PDF of the formal invitation, complete with a menu and a dress code. Maya read it twice, then read the follow-up text from her mother, sent specifically to her. Maya, please dress appropriately for once. I'm begging you. No jeans, no cardigans. Borrow something from a friend if you have to. Ethan's career is on the line, and I don't want you to embarrass us in front of his colleagues. Maya looked down at her own clothing, sweatpants and a hoodie that said "Writer at Work" in faded letters. She smiled. She texted back, "I'll be there, and I promise I won't embarrass anyone." She set the phone down and walked to her closet. The clothes she owned were minimal. Uniforms from the hotel, a few casual outfits, and one decent dress she had bought at a thrift store 5 years ago. That dress would not do. Not for this. Maya picked up her phone again and dialed Clara. "I need a favor," she said. "A big one." "Anything," Clara said. "You're my best-selling author. I need a dress. Something that says, I have nothing to prove. Something that says, I belong here. Something that says..." "Say no more," Clara interrupted. "I know a stylist. She owes me. When do you need it?" "Saturday." Done. The next 4 days were a blur of preparation. Not for the dinner party. Maya had no intention of preparing for that. She prepared for what came after. She arranged for a copy of the New York Times Bestseller list to be delivered to her parents' house on Saturday morning, addressed to her mother. She wrote a short note to accompany it. "Congratulations on the promotion, Ethan. I thought you might want to see what a real achievement looks like." She signed it, Maya, then she crossed it out. She would not sign it. She would let the list speak for itself. She also arranged for a small, discreet package to be delivered to her own apartment. A copy of her book, but not just any copy. This was the special edition, leather-bound, with a ribbon bookmark and a letter from the publisher. She planned to bring it to the dinner party. She would not announce it. She would simply leave it on the table, face up, where everyone could see the author's name, in Tran. And then she would watch. Saturday arrived like a hell breath. Maya spent the morning writing. She never missed a morning, and the afternoon getting ready. The stylist, a woman named Inez with sharp cheekbones and sharper scissors, had sent over 3 dresses. Maya chose the simplest one, a long-sleeved forest green sheath that fell just above the knee. It was elegant without being ostentatious, expensive without being flashy. It cost more than Maya's first car. She wore it with a pair of black heels that made her feel 5 inches taller and a single piece of jewelry, her grandmother's silver locket, which held a photograph of her father. The father she had wanted, not the one she had. She looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the barista, not the night receptionist, not the failure. She was Maya Chen, author of a #3 New York Times bestseller, and she was about to walk into a room full of people who had spent a decade telling her she was worthless. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Don't forget to bring a dish to share. We're short on appetizers. Something store-bought is fine. Maya typed back. I'm bringing something better than food. She slipped a leather-bound book into her purse, grabbed her keys, and walked out the door. The drive to her parents' house took 40 minutes. Maya spent most of it listening to the audiobook of her own novel, not out of vanity, but because she was still searching for the sentence she had missed, the word she could have changed. She never found it. Lan's voice was exactly right. The house was a sprawling colonial in one of the city's oldest suburbs, the kind of place where the lawns were manicured and the neighbors waved but never visited. Maya parked her new car, a sensible sedan, not flashy, but hers, in the driveway behind a row of luxury vehicles. BMWs, Audis, a Mercedes-Benz with a license plate that read Ethan 1. She sat for a moment, gathering herself. Then she stepped out, smoothed her dress, and walked up the front path. The door opened before she could knock. Her mother, Patricia, stood in the doorway, her face frozen in an expression of surprise. She was dressed in a silver gown, her hair perfectly coiffed, her diamonds catching the light. She looked at Maya as if seeing a stranger. Maya, Patricia's voice was uncertain. You look different. Good evening, Mother. Maya stepped inside, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I believe I was told to dress appropriately. Patricia's eyes swept over the forest green dress, the black heels, the silver locket. Her mouth opened and closed. Where did you get that dress? A gift, Maya said, from a friend. Before her mother could ask more, the sound of laughter drifted from the living room. Maya walked toward it, her heart beating steadily, her hand resting on her purse with a leather-bound book weighted. The room was full of people, at least 30, all dressed in black tie, all holding champagne flutes and wearing the careful smiles of the wealthy. She saw her father, Richard, holding court by the fireplace. She saw Ethan, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo, his arm around Brooke. She saw board members, colleagues, old family friends, all the people who had watched her grow up, fail, and disappear. And she saw the long dining table set for a feast. The exact center was empty, waiting for a centerpiece. Maya smiled. She walked toward the table. The living room of the Chen family home had been transformed into a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers that Patricia had rented for the occasion cast prismatic light across the faces of the city's elite. Judges in their black robes, doctors in their tailored suits, corporate lawyers with watches that cost more than most people's weddings. The caterers, hired from a five-star restaurant, wove through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and oysters. A string quartet played Vivaldi from the corner, their music barely audible above the hum of self-congratulation. Maya stepped into this room like a woman entering a battlefield she had already won. The forest green dress clung to her in ways that made the other women stare and the men pretend not to. Her hair, usually pulled back in a careless ponytail, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her grandmother's locket rested at her collarbone, catching the light. She had not worn makeup in years, but tonight she had allowed Inez the stylist to work her magic. A subtle smoky eye, a touch of blush, lips the color of ripe berries. She looked, she thought, like someone who had never cleaned a hotel lobby or served a latte to a complaining businessman. Her mother spotted her first. Patricia was standing near the fireplace, accepting compliments on the floral arrangements, when her gaze landed on Maya. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Confusion, perhaps, or the faintest shadow of recognition. Then the confusion hardened into annoyance. Maya, Patricia said, excusing herself from her conversation and gliding across the room. You're here. Good. I was worried you'd show up late. Her eyes swept over Maya's dress, and her lips pressed together. That's a very nice dress. Where did you get it? A gift, Maya said again. She did not elaborate. Patricia's hand closed around Maya's elbow, steering her away from the main gathering. The family friends are in the back corner. Your cousin Rachel is there. You can sit with her. I don't want you hovering near Ethan's boss. He's very traditional, and I don't want him to get the wrong impression of our family. Maya had thought about it. She had imagined her mother's possessive pride, her father's backhanded compliments, her brother's jealous competitiveness. She had imagined them taking credit, rewriting her story, turning her triumph into their own. No, she said, I want this to be mine. So she became Tran. The initial stood for nothing or for everything. Lan Nguyen, the protagonist. Tran, her grandmother's maiden name. It was a name that belonged to no one and to her alone. The book was published under that name. The author photo was a shadowy image of Maya standing in a doorway, her face turned away. The bio read, L.N. Tran lives in the Midwest, where she writes at night and dreams of the mountains. No one in her family had any reason to suspect. The publication day came and went. Maya worked her shift at the hotel, checked in a family with too much luggage and too little patience, and went home to a pot of ramen. She did not celebrate. She did not tell anyone. She opened her laptop, refreshed her sales rank, and saw that she had sold 47 copies. 47. It was not nothing. It was not everything. She closed the laptop and went to sleep. The second week, sales ticked up. A blogger with a modest following mentioned the book in a roundup. 72 copies. The third week, a librarian in Texas posted a video on social media, crying as she talked about Lan's journey. The video went viral, small-scale viral, the kind that spread through bookish corners of the internet like wildfire in dry grass. By the end of the first month, the book had sold 3,000 copies. Clara called breathless. This is organic. This is word of mouth. This is the kind of thing that publishers can't buy. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. She did not tell her family. Over the next year, Maya learned to live a double life. By day, she was the family disappointment, the barista, the night receptionist, the woman who could never quite get it together. By night, she was L.N. Tran, the mysterious debut author whose book was climbing the charts. She did press under her pseudonym, interviews over email, never by phone, a podcast appearance where she used a voice modulator and gave vague answers about her background. She became a figure of intrigue, the reclusive writer who refused to show her face. The book gained traction. Book clubs picked it up. Social media buzzed with theories about L.N. Tran's identity. Is she Vietnamese? Is she a historian? Is she really a woman? Maya read the speculation with a mixture of amusement and terror. Through it all, her family remained oblivious. At Easter, her mother texted her a link to an entry-level administrative assistant position at a law firm. Good benefits, stable hours. You should apply. Maya texted back, thanks, Mom. I'll look into it. She deleted the text and checked her sales rank. Number 23 on the extended bestseller list. At the 4th of July barbecue, her father pulled her aside. Maya, I'm worried about you. You're 32 years old. You have no savings, no retirement plan, no health insurance. What are you going to do when you're 60? I'm working on something, Maya said. Working on something? He laughed, but it was not a kind laugh. You've been working on something for a decade. At some point, you have to accept reality. Maya looked at her father, his silver hair, his confident eyes, his complete certainty that he knew what was best for her. She thought about the book, which had just sold its 50,000th copy. She thought about the star reviews, the foreign rights, the film agent who had called Clara last week. You're right, Dad, she said. I should accept reality. She walked away before she could say anything else. The breakthrough came in September, 14 months after publication. Maya was working the night shift at the hotel when Clara called, screaming, "You're on the list. The New York Times list. Number 12. 12, Maya. It's not even September yet, and you're already on the list." Maya sat down heavily in the front desk chair. Her legs had turned to water. Are you serious? I am completely serious. They just posted the extended list. You're on it. Your book is on the New York Times bestseller list. Maya did not cry. She had used up her tears long ago. Instead, she felt a strange, quiet calm settle over her, as if she had been waiting for this moment her whole life, and now that it had arrived, she was ready. What do I do now? She asked. Now, Clara said, you decide whether to tell your family. Maya looked at her phone. There were 3 unread messages. One from her mother. Sent you another job listing. This one has dental. One from her father. Ethan just closed a $10 million deal. He's going places. One from Ethan himself. Brooke and I are hosting Thanksgiving this year. Try to show up on time for once. Maya set the phone down. Not yet, she said. Not until it's undeniable. What do you mean, undeniable? I mean, Maya said, until it's on the front page of the newspaper. Until they can't ignore it. Until they have to explain to their friends why their failure of a daughter is suddenly more successful than all of them combined. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she laughed, a low, appreciative sound. You're terrifying. You know that. I learned from the best, Maya said. My family. She hung up, refreshed her sales rank one more time, and went back to work. A guest was complaining about the ice machine. Maya smiled, apologized, and fixed the problem. Outside, the stars were coming out, and somewhere in the darkness, a woman named Lon was watching her village burn and vowing to rebuild it. Maya smiled. She was almost ready. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Maya was still in bed, her laptop open on the pillow beside her, the cursor blinking on a half-written sentence about Lan's final battle. She had been up until 3 a.m., rewriting the same paragraph for the 7th time, and her phone's insistent buzzing felt like a personal attack. She grabbed it, ready to silence the alarm, but the screen displayed Clara Chu. Her agent never called before 9 a.m. unless something had happened. Something big. Clara. Maya's voice was thick with sleep. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong. Clara's voice cracked. Maya, I just got the call from the Times. You're not going to believe this. Maya sat up, her heart suddenly pounding. Tell me. Number 3. New York Times Bestseller list. Number 3. Hardback fiction. You debuted at number 3. The room tilted. Maya gripped the phone with both hands, afraid she might drop it. That's not possible. The book has been out for over a year. Debuts happen in the first week. We're past that. The list doesn't work that way for everyone. Sometimes a book catches fire late. And yours is on fire. The book club picks, the social media buzz, the librarian who cried. It all snowballed. The Times does a monthly list for paperbacks, and you're on it. Number 3, Maya. Number 3. Maya swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her feet touched the cold floor, and she felt strangely grounded, as if the earth had tilted and then righted itself. Number 3, she repeated. There's more. Clara's voice was shaking. I got a call from film agent last night. A major studio, I can't say which one yet, wants to option the movie rights. They're talking 7 figures, Maya. 7 figures. Maya stood up. She walked to the window of her studio apartment, the same window that looked out onto a dumpster and a faded billboard. The sun was rising over the alley, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Everything looked the same. Nothing was the same. 7 figures, she said. The advance alone will be enough to change your life. You could quit the hotel. You could buy an apartment. You could write full-time. This is what we've been waiting for. Maya leaned her forehead against the cool glass. She thought about the night shifts, the cold coffee, the rejections taped to her wall. She thought about Lon, standing on that hill, watching her village burn. Lon had rebuilt, and so finally had Maya. I need to see it, Maya said. The list. Send me a screenshot. Clara sent it within seconds. Maya stared at the image on her phone. The New York Times bestseller list, paperback fiction. 1. The Women by Kristen Hanna. 2. James by Percival Everett. 3. The Silk Weaver's Daughter by L. and Tran. Her name. Her book. Number 3. She did not cry. She had promised herself she would not cry when this moment came. Instead, she opened her laptop and typed an email to her editor, Samuel. The subject line was, "Thank you for believing in a failure." The body contained only the screenshot. Then she called her bank. The apartment was a miracle of geometry and light. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with marble countertops, and a living room that faced west, so that every evening the sun poured through the windows like molten gold. It was in a neighborhood that Maya had never dared to walk through, let alone live in. The real estate agent had been polite but skeptical when Maya first called, a young woman in jeans and a worn coat, asking to see a place that cost more than most people earned in a decade. The first time Maya Chen realized she was the family disappointment. She was 22 years old, newly graduated with a degree in English literature, and standing in her parents' kitchen while her mother served Thanksgiving turkey on bone china that cost more than Maya's entire monthly rent. Maya's still figuring things out. Her mother, Patricia, said to Aunt Helen, her voice pitched somewhere between apology and warning. She's always been a late bloomer. Late bloomer was a generous term. By 22, her brother Ethan had already secured a summer internship at a hedge fund that would later become his launching pad to Wall Street. By 22, her father, Richard, had been accepted to medical school. By 22, Patricia had passed the bar exam. The Chen family did not do figuring things out. The Chen family did milestones, achievements, and 7-figure salaries. Maya had a degree in a subject her father called professional unemployment and a part-time job at a coffee shop that paid $11.50 an hour plus tips. She lived in a studio apartment above a garage in a neighborhood her mother described as questionable. And she had a secret. The secret was a manuscript. A sprawling, 600-page historical fiction novel set in 18th century Vietnam, following the lives of 3 women during the Tay Son Rebellion. She had started it in her junior year of college, scribbling in notebooks between seminars on post-colonial theory and the poetics of memory. She had rewritten the first chapter 14 times. She had cried over a single paragraph about a silk dress for 3 hours. She had poured herself into those pages with an intensity that frightened her, because the pages were the only place where she was not a failure. But no one knew, not her parents, not her brother, not even her closest friends, who had drifted away over the years as Maya became more reclusive, more nocturnal, more obsessed with a world that existed only in her head and on her laptop. At Thanksgiving dinner, Maya sat at the end of the long mahogany table, the place setting that faced the kitchen door, the seat traditionally reserved for the least important guest. She picked at her turkey while her father, Richard, held court at the head of the table. He was 61, silver-haired, still handsome in the way of men who had never had to worry about money. His voice was a surgical instrument, precise, authoritative, and utterly convinced of its own correctness. Ethan closed the Henderson acquisition last week, Richard said, beaming at his son. $7 million in new assets under management. At 28. Tell them how you did it, son. Ethan shrugged with practiced modesty, the same gesture he had been perfecting since middle school. Just good relationships, and a lot of late nights. He's being humble, Patricia added. She was carving the turkey with surgical precision, a skill she had learned from Richard, though she would never admit it. The managing partner called him a rainmaker. Can you imagine? Our boy, a rainmaker. Maya chewed her turkey and said nothing. She had learned, over the years, that silence was her best defense. Any attempt to speak about her own life was met with either pity or ridicule. A few years ago, she had mentioned her freelance proofreading work, editing manuscripts for aspiring authors. Her father had laughed. Editing other people's failed novels? That's your career plan? She had not mentioned her own writing again. And what about you, Maya? Aunt Helen asked, turning her wrinkled face toward the end of the table. Still at the coffee shop? Still there, Maya said quietly. But I've also been doing some freelance work. Proofreading. Copy editing. Copy editing, Richard repeated, as if tasting something rotten. That's what they call it now. She's finding herself, Patricia said quickly, the same phrase she had been using for a decade. It takes time for some people. Ethan leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass. He looked at Maya with an expression that was almost curious, almost kind, if you didn't know him. You know, Maya, if you ever want to build some actual work ethic, my firm is looking for a new cleaning crew. I could put in a word. Get you something more reliable than the coffee shop. The table went quiet. Patricia's knife paused over the turkey. Richard raised an eyebrow. Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she forced herself to smile. That's generous, Ethan. I'll think about it. She would not think about it. She would go home that night, sit at her second-hand desk, and write another 500 words about a woman named Lon, who was watching her village burn and vowing to rebuild it with her own two hands. Lon did not have brothers who offered her cleaning jobs. Lon had a spine made of steel. Lon was the woman Maya wished she could be. The years passed like seasons in a novel, each one marked by the same familiar rituals of humiliation. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, the annual summer barbecue where Richard grilled steaks and Patricia made a salad that cost more than Maya's weekly grocery budget. At every gathering, the questions were the same. Still writing, said with a smirk, as if writing were a hobby, like knitting or stamp collecting. Any new jobs? Said with a raised eyebrow. Met anyone special? Said with a sigh, as if Maya's singleness were a personal failure rather than a choice. And Maya would smile, and she would say, not yet, and she would take a bite of whatever was on her plate and pretend the words didn't sting. But they did sting. Every time. The worst was the Christmas when she was 27. She had just finished the 5th draft of her novel, a full revision that had taken her 18 months, working in the hours between her shifts as a night receptionist at a budget hotel. She was exhausted, underfed, and running on caffeine and the fragile hope that maybe, this time, the manuscript was good enough. Her mother had given her a gift card to a professional styling service, essentially a session with a consultant who would teach her how to dress for job interviews. You never know when you might need to look presentable, Patricia had said, her voice dripping with false cheer. Her father had given her a subscription to a trade journal for administrative assistants. And Ethan had given her a framed photograph of himself shaking hands with a managing partner. The inscription read, "To my little sister, someday you'll find your own success. Love, Ethan." Maya had smiled, thanked them all, and driven home to her studio apartment. She had set the framed photograph on her desk, face down. Then she had opened her laptop and written for 6 straight hours, until her fingers cramped and her eyes burned. She wrote about Lon, now a general in the rebel army, standing on a hill overlooking the imperial city. She wrote about the weight of the sword in Lan's hand, the cold wind on her face, the knowledge that everything she loved had been taken from her and that she would take it back. She wrote until dawn, and then she went to work. By the time Maya was 30, she had completed 9 full drafts of the novel. She had sent it to 37 literary agents. She had received 37 rejections, some kind, some form, some brutally dismissive. Historical fiction is a hard sell. The scope is too ambitious for a debut. We don't see a commercial market for this. She had cried over every single one. Then she had revised again. At 31, the 38th agent said yes. A woman named Clara Chu, who represented a small but respected agency in Boston, had read the manuscript over a weekend and called Maya on a Monday morning. "This isn't just good," Clara had said. "This is extraordinary. I'm going to sell it." but you have to trust me, and you have to be patient. Maya had agreed. She had signed a contract with trembling hands and then gone to work her shift at the hotel, where a man had vomited in the lobby and accused her of being incompetent. She had cleaned the vomit, smiled at the man, and gone home to write. The submission process took another year. There were more rejections from publishers this time, not agents. Clara was relentless, sending the manuscript out in waves, revising the pitch, targeting smaller houses when the big ones said no. Maya learned to live in a state of suspended animation, her breath caught between hope and despair. And then, when she was 32, an offer came. A small independent press in Minneapolis. The kind of press that published literary fiction and poetry. The kind of press that paid tiny advances but gave its authors real editorial attention. The advance was $5,000. The publication date was 18 months away. Maya had cried again, but this time they were tears of joy. She did not tell her family. The editing process took another year. Maya worked with an editor named Samuel, who pushed her to cut 200 pages, deepen the secondary characters, and rewrite the ending 3 times. It was brutal. It was glorious. By the end, the novel was leaner, sharper, and more powerful than she had ever imagined. In the meantime, she continued to work. Barista, night receptionist, freelance proofreader. She told no one at the hotel about her book. She told no one at the coffee shop. She told no one at the family dinners, where her mother now introduced her as still trying to figure things out, and her father sighed about the wasted potential. At Easter, when Maya was 33, Ethan brought his new fiancée, a woman named Brooke who worked in private equity and wore a watch that cost more than Maya's car. Brooke had asked Maya what she did, and Maya had said, "I'm a writer." The table had gone silent. A writer, Brooke had repeated, as if Maya had said she was a circus performer. Freelance, Maya added quickly. Proofreading, copy editing. Ah, Brooke said, and then she turned to Ethan and began discussing the catering for their wedding. Maya had smiled, taken a bite of her potato salad, and said nothing about the galleys waiting for her at home. The galleys of her book. The book that would be published in 6 months. The book that had already received a starred review from a major industry publication. A review that Clara had forwarded with the subject line, "I think we have something here." She had printed the review and taped it to the wall above her desk, next to a photograph of her father's face. She looked at it every morning before she started writing. The book was published on a Tuesday in October. Maya did not tell her family. She went to her shift at the hotel, where she checked in a businessman who complained about the thread count of the sheets. She went home, ate ramen, and refreshed her email every 5 minutes. The first week, nothing happened. The second week, a small spike in sales, mostly friends of friends, people Clara had reached out to. The third week, a blogger with a large following mentioned the book in a roundup of underrated historical fiction. Sales tripled. By the fourth week, the book had sold 10,000 copies. By the sixth week, 20,000. By the eighth week, it hit the extended bestseller list, number 35. Clara called Maya, breathless. "I think we're going to break the top 20. Maya did not tell her family. At Thanksgiving, she sat at the end of the table, the same seat facing the kitchen door. Her father asked if she was still doing that freelance thing. Her mother asked if she had considered going back to school for something practical. Her brother, now married to Brooke, announced that he was being considered for a managing director position. Maya smiled. She ate her turkey. She said, "That's wonderful, Ethan." And then she went home and checked her sales rank. Number 12 on the New York Times list. Number 7 on the USA Today list. Number 1 on the independent bookstore list. She printed the screenshots and taped them to her wall next to the starred review. She still did not tell her family. The phone call came on a Wednesday night in December. Maya was working the night shift at the hotel, typing a new scene, a sequel, maybe, or something entirely different, when her phone buzzed. It was her mother, Maya. Patricia said, her voice strained. "Your father and I just saw something online. There's a book. It says it's written by a Maya, Chen. It's on the bestseller list. Is that you?" Maya leaned back in her chair, looked at the ceiling of the hotel lobby, and smiled. "Yes, Mom," she said quietly. "That's me." There was a long silence. Then Patricia said, "But how? When did you have time? You've been working all those jobs." "I wrote at night," Maya said. "After work, before work, on my lunch breaks. For 10 years. Another silence. Then, in the background, she heard her father's voice. "What's she saying? What's going on?" Patricia's voice was small when she spoke again. "You never told us. You never asked," Maya said. "You were too busy telling me I was a failure." She hung up, set her phone on the desk, and returned to her manuscript. Outside, the snow was beginning to fall. Inside, the lobby was warm and quiet. And Maya, Chen, the family disappointment, the barista, the night receptionist, the invisible woman, smiled at the blinking cursor and wrote the next sentence. She was not a failure. She never had been. She was just waiting for the right moment to prove it. The rejections arrived like clockwork. Every 2 weeks, Maya would open her email with the same mixture of hope and dread. And every 2 weeks, she would find a form letter or a terse paragraph explaining why her manuscript was not quite right. Not for us. Doesn't fit our list. We wish you the best elsewhere. She had pasted them into a folder on her laptop, titled Fuel. By the time she had accumulated 38 rejections, she had stopped crying. The tears had dried up somewhere around number 22, replaced by a dull, persistent ache that she had learned to ignore. She would read the rejection, close the email, and open her manuscript. She would revise a sentence, then another, then another. The act of writing was its own defiance. It was the 39th query that changed everything. Maya had sent on a Tuesday after a double shift at the hotel. She was running on 3 hours of sleep and a latte that had gone cold 2 hours ago. The query letter was short, almost resigned. She had rewritten it so many times that it had lost all meaning. She attached the first 50 pages, hit send, and forgot about it. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from a name she did not recognize, Clara Chu. The subject line was not a form rejection. It said, "Your novel. I stayed up all night reading." Maya's hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Maya, I'm sorry it took me so long to respond. Your query landed in my slush pile, and I confess I nearly passed it over. Historical fiction is a hard sell, as you probably know, but something made me read the first page, then the second, then the 50th. I have just finished your partial manuscript at 3 a.m., and I am writing to you before I lose my nerve. This is extraordinary. I don't say that lightly. I've been an agent for 12 years, and I have never read a debut like this. The scope, the voice, the sheer ambition, it's breathtaking. I would very much like to represent you. Please call me at your earliest convenience. My number is below. I don't care what time it is. Warmly, Kuladatu." Maya read the email 7 times. Then she called her mother, not to share the news, she would never do that, but to ask if she could borrow the family's old printer to print something. Her mother sighed, asked why she couldn't just use the library like a normal person, and reluctantly agreed. Maya printed the email. She taped it to her wall, next to the photograph of her father. Then she called Clara Chu. The phone call lasted 2 hours. Clara was warm, profane, and fiercely intelligent. She asked questions that no one else had ever asked about the historical research, about Land's internal arc, about the symbolism of the silk dress. She understood the book in a way that Maya had never dared to hope for. "Here's the thing," Clara said. "The big publishers are going to say this is too risky. Historical fiction by a debut author, set in 18th century Vietnam, with a cast of mostly women, they'll call it uncommercial. But I know the small presses. I know the editors who are hungry for something real. I can sell this, but I need you to trust me." "I trust you," Maya said, and she meant it. Clara sent the manuscript out to 12 editors. Over the next 6 months, Maya learned the meaning of patience. The rejections came again, but this time, they were different. "Brilliant writing, but we don't know how to market it. We love Lon, but the length is daunting. Perhaps if she cut the 3rd act." Maya refused to cut the 3rd act. Clara fought for her, and in the end, it was a small independent press in Minneapolis, a house called Redbird Books, that said yes. The advance was $5,000. The publication date was 18 months away. "It's not a lot of money," Clara said apologetically, "but they'll give you real editorial attention, and they believe in the book." "It's enough," Maya said. "It's more than I ever had." She signed the contract with a pen she had stolen from the hotel front desk. Then she went to work, where a guest complained about the temperature of the pool. She smiled, apologized, and thought about Lon. The editorial process was a revelation. Maya's editor, Samuel, was a man in his 60s with a gray beard and the kind of gentle intensity that made you want to be better. He read the manuscript 3 times before they even spoke. "You've written a great book," he said. "Now let's make it a masterpiece." They cut 200 pages. They deepened the secondary characters. They rewrote the ending 3 times. Maya learned that revision was not defeat, it was refinement. Every cut, every change, every sleepless night brought the book closer to what it needed to be. In the middle of this process, her family continued to gather. Thanksgiving came. Christmas came. Maya attended both, sitting at the end of the table, smiling at the jokes about her lack of direction. Her mother introduced her to a cousin's husband as still figuring things out. Her father asked if she had considered trade school. Ethan, now engaged to Brooke, offered her a job cleaning his firm's offices. "It's honest work, Maya. You could finally build some savings." Maya thanked him politely. She did not tell him that she had just received a star review from Kirkus. She did not tell him that the book had been chosen as an indie next pick. She did not tell him that Clara had already sold foreign rights in 6 countries. She went home, opened her laptop, and wrote a thank you note to Samuel. Then she revised another chapter. The pen name had been Clara's idea. Your family sounds complicated, Clara had said carefully. If you publish under your own name, they'll find out. They'll insert themselves into the process. They'll make it about them. Is that what you want?